To laugh or to cry? That really is the question, isn't it? As the slowly cooling corpse of Volition finally stops twitching. Killed by Saints Row, of all things. Though, I suppose there was nothing truly Saints Row-ish about that abomination that put Volition out of its long-standing agony. Because this is a game company that once upon a time gave us Freespace, that gave us Red Faction, that gave us Summoner, and that of course gave us the original Saints Row. They used to be a pretty great company with some real ambitions and grit behind them. I mean, Freespace is still one of the best space shooter sim thingies ever. Like, it's a great game. And Freespace 2 somehow was even better. Summoner is still a classic RPG for the 7 people who knows what that is. And Red Faction was, for its time, rather revolutionary. And Saints Row 2, well, it kind of blew everyone away by taking what was already becoming a little bit of a stale and turgid formula of the GTA-esque and simply just going batshit insane with it. Which makes it, of course, all the more ridiculous that it was Saints Row that finally put the last bullet into Volition's brain by turning it into something that it should never have been in the first place. In all reality, Volition was already dead. Volition has been dead for 10, 20 odd years, frankly. They've simply been slowly grinding along as their wheels grow ever smaller and more worn down, living off the promises of yesteryears. Perhaps this is a kindness, really, that they are now dead and gone, choking on their own shit and vomit as wokeness overcomes them. God, of all the things to kill Volition. And yet, that is exactly what it did, of course. See, here's the thing. Here's the problem, right? You cannot be a rebel forever, because at some point, your revolution will win. That seems to be the case here. The original Saints Row was ridiculous, over the top. It was, well, attacking things like the establishment, frankly. It was a bit revolutionary, a bit rambunctious. Red Faction and Freespace was in many ways the same thing, where they approached established norms and they kind of messed around with them a little bit without going too crazy. Whereas Saints Row The Awakening, well, it was fiercely establishment. It towed the party line every step of the way. It only made the, well, approved jokes. It's like, oh, why are you being criminals? Well, it's because of student debt. Hey. And Volition got what they deserved. Embracer Group has now finally choked the last little embers of life out of them, and honestly, it's the only thing they could have done. Embracer Group as well. It's one of those companies that says all the wrong things, but has for the most part done right. With a couple of exceptions here and there, especially the recent Lord of the Rings collaboration, for example, in which they were somewhat involved, as they are now the owners of the Lord of the Rings property, and we'll see what they're going to do about that, but there was no other option as far as Volition was concerned. Even if they were to try and repeat their steps and make something they created in the past, well, they don't even own the rights to most of these things anymore. Like Summoner, for example, I'm pretty sure isn't theirs. Red Faction, I'm pretty sure isn't theirs. Hell, Freespace might be the only thing, but that's kind of tied in with the whole Descent franchise as well, so God even knows. And, God, Volition, see, Saints Row wasn't merely just a storytelling disaster. It wasn't merely just a focus misstep on every single level, it was also just a genuinely garbage video game, with bugs galore, terrible pacing, awful graphics in many cases, and just designed by monkeys. Simple as, frankly. Designed by absolute ingrate monkeys. Any skill and capabilities that was at the studio is long gone by now, and there was no saving it. There was no salvaging it. Even if they went back to one of their old greats, there is simply no way they could have actually made them great again. Even if we did get Summoner 3 today, and it did get a sequel, Summoner 2, which again about 7 people know of, I suspect, it would not have been the same. I mean, a Saints Row game. It should be very difficult to actually mess up a Saints Row game. Because I remember, one of the things they talked about way back in the day during Saints Row 3, I think, was how do we top Saints Row 2? And the answer is, you don't. It's been long enough, and there's been enough of a general shift in entertainment to the point if you just did Saints Row 2 again, but you adopted the modern day counterculture, it would still be a cult classic, frankly. If you simply just took the edgy humor of 2, maybe with a dash of 3 here and there, and you worked in, again, today's counterculture, you made fun of the established nature of feminism and progressivism, it would have been a cult classic, even if it was a bit rough around the edges, simply because the key humor in of it would have remained good. But since Volition was already infested by that political ideology, well, wokeism is not known for mocking itself, shall we say. And as for Freespace or Red Faction, God, they tried. I mean, there's been several attempts to reboot Red Faction, every single one of them worse than the previous one, so I don't really think so. And destructible environment isn't exactly the major selling point today that it was back then. Freespace would have been their best bet, but that was actually a very polished game with very interesting controls, tight mission structure, and some fantastic twists that I don't even know if you could do in today's always online internet world. Volition was doomed. Either way, there was no salvaging it. There simply was none. And now that they are finally gone, maybe somebody else could try, Maybe somebody else could look upon their legacy and say, hey, these were actually some pretty goddamn good ideas. Maybe we should try that instead of making, just generic Shoot Game 3000 as well. Hey, who am I kidding? This is, in all due likelihood, simply just the end of an era now. Frankly, straight up, unironically, this is probably it for the more, off-the-wall video game. Shiny has been dead for years, of course. They too were one of the developers that looked at something established and went crazy with it. The era of innovation, of creativity, of crazy stuff is, well, simply over, it seems like. There's still some innovation in the indie sphere, I suppose, but maybe I'm just being too much of a doomer. I mean, you would think that the gaming industry would need to revitalize itself at some point after years of turgid stagnation and an absolute disgust of anything new. And yet, is it even possible? I mean, it should be. In today's age of ever easier games development, where pre-made tools are a dime a dozen thrown after you on the street, there really should be no limit to creativity. And yet, I sit here and I mourn the passing of Volition, a company that wasn't even that creative to begin with, really, and whose last game was the absolute antithesis of anything interesting or original. And still, it is a bit of a passing of a titan, so I suppose I'll wrap up the eulogy by saying, rest in peace, Volition, and rest in garbage, Saints Row. Have a good day.